For 20 years, the Algarve has been the answer to one question. Where in Western Europe can you get guaranteed sun, gorgeous beaches, and cheap beer without remortgaging your house? But in 2026, every single Algarve municipality now charges a tourist tax, coastal rents have surged over 50% in 5 years, summer accommodation costs 60% more than off-peak, and the local councils are actively threatening to cap vacation rental licenses because their own residents can no longer afford to live here. A mid-range couple now needs 140 euros a day. The Algarve is not a budget destination anymore. The only question is whether it's still worth the money.
Welcome to Phil and H Travel. Is it worth it? Today we are heading to Portugal's Algarve, 150 kilometers of golden cliffs, hidden coves, and turquoise Atlantic water that has been Europe's favorite affordable coastline for decades. But 2026 is the year the price tag changes. A region-wide tourist tax, a housing crisis pushing locals out of their own towns, and soaring summer prices are forcing a reckoning. We are going to break down what it really costs town by town, name the 3 logistics traps that drain your budget, and deliver the honest verdict on whether the Algarve still deserves its reputation. This is the no-spin verdict.
Okay, so stepping out of those quotes for a second, because wow, what you just heard were the exact opening words from this incredibly thorough, honestly kind of brutally honest 2026 travel guide.
Yeah, it's put together by a duo known as Phil and H, and it does not pull any punches.
No, it really doesn't. And for today's deep dive, our mission is basically to take this exhaustive, logistics-first breakdown they've done and just rip it apart to see what makes it tick. We're going to map out the exact real-world logistics,
Right, the true out-of-pocket costs.
Exactly. The actual costs and the hidden financial sinkholes of the Algarve in 2026. Because if you're going to spend your hard-earned money and your precious vacation time on this famous coastline, you really need to know if it's actually the right fit for you.
Yeah, we are entirely ditching the glossy tourism board brochures today.
100%. Because to really understand the reality of the Algarve today, you have to ground yourself in its geography first.
Right.
And fully grasp this massive structural economic shift that's basically redefining the whole region right beneath our feet.
It is a profound shift, and honestly, you really cannot understand the economics without first understanding the map. So when we talk about the Algarve, we're looking at Portugal's southernmost region.
Right.
Just picture 150 kilometers of continuous, stunning coastline facing the Atlantic Ocean. Geographically, it starts right at the Spanish border in the end.
At a town called Villarreal de Santo Antonio. Right.
Exactly. From Villarreal de Santo Antonio, it stretches all the way across the bottom of the country to these dramatic, windswept cliffs of Sagres out in the far west.
Wow.
And along that relatively compact stretch, you are looking at over 200 distinct beaches, plus a climate that boasts more than 300 days of sunshine a year.
Which is wild. 300 days.
It is. And that specific combination, the sheer volume of beaches and that near guaranteed weather, that's exactly why, since the 1970s, this region has served as the default, famously affordable beach holiday for British, German, Dutch, and Scandinavian travelers.
But hold on, because the word affordable is doing some incredibly heavy lifting in that sentence.
It really is.
Because, according to this guide from Phil and H, affordability is exactly what is vanishing.
Yeah.
And this 2026 cost shift they highlight, it's not just your standard run-of-the-mill inflation.
No, definitely not.
It's not like a temporary seasonal bump because egg prices went up. It is structural. For the first time, every single major municipality across that entire coastline has implemented a tourist tax.
Yeah, that's a massive change for the region.
So if you are traveling in the high season, which they broadly define as April through October, you are paying €2 per person per night, just for the privilege of sleeping there.
Right. And then in the low season, it drops down to €1 per night.
Now, they do cap it, right? You're only charged for up to a maximum of 5 nights. But think about it. When you are traveling as a family of 4, that is an immediate 40 euros gone before you have even bought a bottle of water.
Yeah, and while 40 euros might not seem like a total deal breaker for a family's entire holiday budget, you really have to look at the macro effect of this.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, when you multiply that tax by the sheer, staggering volume of millions of visitors pouring into the region, the numbers just become monumental. Take the municipality of Lulé, for example.
Okay.
Lulé alone is expecting to raise 4.6 million euros annually just from this one tax.
Wait, 4.6 million, just Lulé.
Just Lulé. And that math completely makes sense when you understand the geography, because Lulé's jurisdiction covers the absolute mega resort zones of the central Algarve. We're talking about places like Quinta do Lago, Valle do Lobo, and Vila Moura.
Ah, okay, so the really high-density tourist hubs.
Exactly. Now, the local councils argue this money is desperately needed to maintain infrastructure, fund extra summer trash collection, and just manage the wear and tear on these medieval plumbing systems that honestly simply weren't built for this kind of capacity.
Which makes sense from their side. But from the traveler's perspective, that tax is just the visible tip of a very expensive iceberg, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The underlying accommodation prices have climbed relentlessly. The guide points out a very specific, stark example that I think perfectly illustrates the pace of this change.
Yeah, let's hear it.
So, a standard week in a two-bedroom apartment in Lagos that cost £450 in October of 2025.
Okay, 450.
That exact same week will now run you £750 or more in August of 2026.
Wow. That is a staggering jump. You're talking about almost a doubling in price in less than a year.
It is.
And what is vital to understand here is that this tourist price surge is happening at the exact same time as Portugal's brutal national housing crisis, which has hit the Algarve harder than literally anywhere else in the country.
Yeah, the local impact is devastating.
Coastal rents for locals have skyrocketed over 50% since 2020. And the guide says this is being driven by two massive engines. First, you have the explosion of what the Portuguese call alojamento local.
Right, the short-term rentals.
Exactly. These are the short-term vacation rental licenses that essentially turn what used to be residential apartment buildings into unregulated hotels.
Yeah.
It acts like a giant vacuum cleaner, just sucking up the available housing supply.
Yeah, and then second, you have an enormous continuous influx of remote workers coming down from Northern Europe or the U.S. with significantly higher salaries, and they are competing for whatever housing stock is left over.
Right. And the policy environment has shifted to reflect this intense socioeconomic friction, too. In 2026, the Portuguese government made a highly controversial move.
Ending the rent cap.
Yes, they ended their 2% annual rent cap on new leases. Without that artificial ceiling, landlords immediately adjusted prices to match the immense international demand, and local rents surged even faster. It has reached an absolute boiling point.
It really has. Local councils in places like Lule and Lagos aren't just complaining about it anymore.
No.
No, they are publicly, actively threatening to enforce quota-based restrictions to cap new vacation rental licenses. The human cost happening behind the scenes of your sunny vacation is severe. Locals in working-class or historically authentic towns like Olham and Tavira are reporting being completely permanently priced out of the very neighborhoods where their families have lived and worked for generations.
Which makes me want to pause and ask a really difficult question here. If a region literally prices out the locals who create its culture,
Like the people who run the neighborhood bakeries, who know the history of the port, who speak the language, who give a place its actual soul, does the destination fundamentally lose the very charm that made it famous in the first place? I mean, if you remove the Portuguese people from a Portuguese town, what are you actually visiting?
I mean, that is the defining paradox of modern global tourism, isn't it? A place becomes famous specifically for its authentic, raw, affordable charm.
Yeah.
That fame brings international attention. The attention brings money. The money brings massive infrastructure development, and that development fundamentally, irreversibly alters the ecosystem. What we are seeing in the Algarve right now is not a temporary blip.
No.
It's a fundamental genetic change in the region's DNA. The tension between sustaining a highly lucrative tourism economy and preserving local livability is actively reshaping what the Algarve is on a day-to-day basis. The whole budget-friendly, hidden gem narrative that defined it for 50 years isn't just evolving, it is under genuine existential threat. Wow. And these heavy economic realities, they aren't just philosophical, right? They directly, aggressively impact the most basic logistical decision you have to make. When should you actually go?
Exactly.
Because knowing when to go to the Algarve is no longer just about checking a weather app. It is a high-stakes financial strategy. Let's look at how these crowds and seasons operate on the ground.
Well, the climate really dictates the entire rhythm of the economy there. The Algarve enjoys a Mediterranean climate, though it's uniquely moderated by those cooler Atlantic breezes, meaning it rarely feels as stiflingly humid as, say, Greece or southern Italy.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, but because of that weather pattern, the pricing swings violently month by month. The absolute high season is July through August.
Naturally.
The daytime temperatures consistently hit 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. The beaches are packed shoulder to shoulder with umbrellas, the restaurants are overwhelmed, and crucially, this is when accommodation prices peak at that massive 60% premium over the low season rates.
60%? That is wild.
It's a huge premium. This is the traditional window when families across Europe who are strictly locked into mandatory school holidays basically arrive en masse. Major resort towns like Albufeira and Lagos don't just feel busy, they feel genuinely overwhelmingly congested.
You know, I always think of that 60% summer premium as being exactly like surge pricing on a rideshare app.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. You know the feeling. It's pouring rain, you just left a concert, everyone wants a car at the exact same second, and suddenly a basic 10-minute ride costs triple what it normally does. Imagine that aggressive surge pricing, but applied to an entire month of your life.
Yeah, that sounds painful.
Your hotel, your rental car, your flights, everything is surging simultaneously. Then on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you look at the low season, which spans from November through February.
Right, the winter months.
Yeah, and the daytime temperatures hover around a very pleasant 16 to 18 degrees. Now, that is fantastic if your goal is to hike the coastal trails, play golf, or cycle without sweating through your shirt. But it is entirely too cold for comfortable swimming in the Atlantic Ocean.
Definitely too cold for swimming.
And while accommodation prices absolutely plummet to a fraction of summer rates, there's a major trap here. Many of the best independent restaurants and cafes in the smaller towns completely board up their windows and close for the season. You might save a fortune on a hotel, but you are walking through a ghost town.
Which is exactly why the guide heavily emphasizes finding the sweet spots. If you want to optimize for both experience and budget, June and September are the undisputed winners.
Okay, June and September.
Yeah. In those months, you get perfectly dry weather, daytime temperatures sitting in the highly comfortable mid to high 20s. The Atlantic has actually had time to warm up to a swimmable temperature, and the prices sit a very comfortable 30 to 40% below those peak August rates.
That sounds perfect, but what if you have kids?
Right. If you were traveling with a family and you were totally bound by school schedules, the guide recommends targeting the late May half term.
Ah, smart.
It is significantly cheaper than the main July and August summer break. The temperatures are already hitting the mid-20s, and crucial family infrastructure like the massive water parks are already open for business. And whatever you do, don't discount October.
Really? October?
Yeah, October remains a highly viable, deeply underrated option, especially because the sea retains all the accumulated summer heat, particularly along that more sheltered eastern coast near Tavira and Ulholm.
That makes total sense. You also have to think deeply about what kind of energy you want to be surrounded by, right?
Yeah.
Because the crowd patterns vary wildly depending on which zone of the coast you choose.
Oh, massively.
The central Algarve, so we were talking about Albufeira, Villamora, Cortera, that area absorbs the heaviest, most intense tourist traffic year-round. It is dense, it is loud, and it is highly developed.
Very built up.
But if you take a breath and head east, out to Tavira and the protected Ria Formosa lagoon system, it stays remarkably quieter and much more traditional, even in the absolute chaotic peak of August.
It's like a different world over there.
And then if you go in the complete opposite direction to the western Algarve, pushing past Lagos out towards the cliffs of Sagres, that draws a completely different demographic entirely. It's much less about massive package holiday hotels and much more about independent travelers, van lifers, surfers, and nature lovers facing the raw Atlantic.
And here is where the mechanics of the travel industry get really interesting for 2026 specifically. There is a new massive variable altering the traditional seasonal math we just discussed.
Oh, what is it?
Drastically increased flight capacity into Faro Airport. Multiple major European airlines are adding routes and upgrading to larger aircraft.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the ripple effect of that capacity is fascinating. More flights mean more visitors are being successfully spread across the entire year. The consequence is that this increased shoulder season traffic is actively eroding the traditional price advantage of traveling in June or September.
Wait, really? So the sweet spot is getting more expensive?
Exactly. The historically cheap months are leveling out, becoming more expensive because the demand curve is flattening. The airline's yield management algorithms are essentially eliminating the off-season bargain.
That is brutal. Okay, so once you navigate that complex calendar, pick your dates, and actually book that flight, you are faced with arrival. You have to get from the tarmac to your bed. And your choices, the exact moment you touch down, set the financial and emotional tone for the entire trip.
Right. The absolute gateway to the region is Faro Airport, which geographically sits somewhat right of center, leaning towards the eastern edge of the coastline.
Okay, so just to give you some context on the journey, direct flights from the UK take roughly 3 hours.
Yeah, very quick hop.
If you are coming from the US, you will almost certainly have to connect through the capital, Lisbon, which brings your total travel time to anywhere between 9 and 11 hours. But Faro itself is incredibly well connected within Europe, isn't it? Oh, incredibly. It is served relentlessly by Ryanair, EasyJet, Wizz Air, British Airways, TAT Portugal, and a massive host of regional European low-cost carriers.
So lots of options.
Definitely. If you are flying return from London, for example, you are looking at a ticket price anywhere from 120 to 300 pounds. And that variance is entirely dependent on the season you chose and how many months in advance you locked it in.
Okay, now picture this. You land at Faro. The sliding glass doors open, the heat hits you, and you grab your bags. This is where people make their very first critical logistical choice. And my question is, when you are standing there at the arrivals curb, how much does your choice of transfer actually dictate the rest of your budget?
It dictates it immediately and significantly because the costs vary wildly by destination, and in the Algarve, distance literally equals money.
Right. If you opt for a private transfer, you are charged per vehicle, not per person. It runs about 35 euros if you are heading to the dense hub of Albufeira, and 30 euros to the Gulf resorts of Villamora.
Okay, that's not terrible.
No, but if you booked your stay all the way out west in Lagos, that private transfer price jumps to 75 euros per vehicle.
Ouch.
Exactly. Now, there is a budget option that the guide highlights. It's the Aerobus, specifically Line 56, operated by the Vivis network. But you have to know the severe catch. It only operates from May to September.
Oh, really? Just this summer?
Just the summer. If you are there in that window, it has 6 departures daily, connecting the airport directly to Albufeira, Lagoa, Portimão, and Lagos, and it costs a very reasonable 17 euros per person.
That's a great deal.
It is, but outside of that rigid May to September window, your public options shrink drastically. You are forced into expensive taxis, pre-booked private transfers, or relying on a highly infrequent, often frustrating regional train system that doesn't even connect directly to the airport terminal.
Wow, okay. And putting the money aside for a second, your transfer dictates your very first sensory impression of the region, which is completely dependent on which zone your driver heads toward. Imagine stepping into 2 different movie sets, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
If your transfer takes you east to Tavira, you step out of the car onto ancient cobbled streets. You look up and see intricately tiled church facades. You immediately smell fresh sardines grilling over charcoal in the open air, and there is this gentle, calming hush from the tidal waters of the Rio Formoso lagoon. It feels deeply authentically like Portugal.
It really does.
But if your transfer turns right and drops you in the central zone, right on the Albufeira Strip, the doors open to glaring neon signs, laminated English-language pub menus pushing 2-for-1 shots, and a sensory overload of thumping bass that, frankly, could be any massive anonymous party resort anywhere in the Mediterranean.
That contrast is vital to understand before you book. The Algarve is not one monolithic uniform place. It is at least 3 distinctly different vacation experiences that just happen to share the same 150 kilometers of coastline.
Right.
And your first impression, your emotional baseline for the trip, is heavily manipulated by whether you head east to the authentic historic towns, west to the raw surf culture, or central to the built-up resorts. But there's one universal first impression, regardless of your zone, and that is the heat.
Oh, yeah, the heat.
It is a physical presence. It hits you immediately upon leaving the terminal. Even in the shoulder seasons, the midday sun in southern Portugal is intense, relentless, and direct. This is particularly true along the sheltered, cliff-backed cove beaches of the central and western coast, where there is absolutely no natural tree cover or shade.
You're just totally exposed.
Completely. The light literally reflects off those towering golden limestone cliffs, creating this visual and thermal intensity that iPhone photographs just cannot accurately capture.
Okay, so you've survived the initial heat, you've paid for your transfer, and you've arrived at your chosen zone. And that zone directly dictates the single biggest expense of your entire journey.
Where you sleep.
Exactly, where you sleep. The source guide breaks this down into 4 distinct, highly specific budget tiers, and we really need to look at exactly what your money buys in the reality of 2026.
Let's start at the foundation with the backpacker tier, which the guide strictly defines as under 50 euros a night.
Okay, under 50.
Hostel dorm beds across the Algarve currently run between 18 and 30 euros per night. Lagos is undeniably the absolute hub here. It offers the best, most developed backpacker infrastructure in the region. You have famous institutions like the Rising Cock Hostel in Lagos, starting from 22 euros a night, and the Bura Surf House out in Sagres, starting from 25 euros.
And what are you getting for that? Just a bed?
What you are paying for here isn't just a bunk bed. These places are highly engineered social hubs with communal kitchens, organized pub crawls, and great proximity to the surf. If you are a bit older or you just want more privacy on that exact same budget, you have to look east.
Right.
Budget guest houses in the traditional eastern towns of Tavira or Olham offer basic, clean, private rooms for 45 to 60 euros. But listen closely. At this tier, self-catering is absolutely essential to financial survival. You cannot eat out 3 meals a day. You need to drop your bags and immediately walk to a pingo doce or a little supermarket to stock up on groceries.
Okay, makes sense. Stepping up from that, we hit the mid-range couple tier, which sits between 80 and 160 euros a night.
Right.
According to Phil and H, this is actually the Algarve's strongest, most competitive tier. But the pricing here is incredibly volatile based on the calendar month. Let me give you the breakdown. A standard 2-bedroom apartment in Lagos, booked through Booking.com or Airbnb, will cost you a very reasonable 60 to 100 euros per night in the shoulder season.
Which is great.
It is.
Yeah.
But if you stubbornly want that exact same apartment in the second week of August, it violently jumps to 120 to 180 euros a night.
Ouch. Yeah.
Right. Now, if you aren't into apartments and are looking for specific, reliable hotel value, the guide highlights the Hotel Cidade de Olhão, which runs about 75 euros a night. That places you right in the heart of the authentic Eastern Algarve. Or, if you want a classic, mid-range beach hotel experience right on the cliffs, the Carvi Beach Hotel in Lagos starts from 110 euros.
And there's a brilliant specific geographic strategy the guide recommends to maximize value in this mid-range tier. They refer to it as the Lapad equivalent strategy.
Lapad, like in Croatia.
Exactly. It's a clever reference to the practice of staying in the Lapad Peninsula slightly outside the incredibly expensive main tourist hub of Dubrovnik to get dramatically better value. Translated to the Algarve, this strategy means actively choosing to stay in Tavira or Olham. By staying just slightly east of the main central fray, you instantly save 20 to 30% compared to the nightly rates in Albufeira or Lagos.
That's a significant saving.
It really is. But crucially, you don't just save money, you actually get a much more genuine atmosphere and far better, cheaper local food. It is a calculated trade-off. You are trading a tiny bit of geographic convenience for a massive return in authenticity and financial value.
I love that. Okay, next up is the family tier, ranging from 120 to 250 euros a night. Families are a totally different demographic because they have very specific, non-negotiable needs, right?
Definitely.
They need physical space, they need safe pools, and they need to be within walking distance of the beaches to avoid parking nightmares. Aparth Hotel-style properties are the absolute go-to solution here. The guide points to the Pine Cliffs Resort near Albufeira, which starts from 200 euros, or the Adriana Beach Club in Olhos de Agua from 150 euros.
And these places are built for families.
Let's be clear about what these places are. They are highly efficient machines built explicitly for families. They have dedicated kids clubs, multiple supervised pools, and massive buffet options that completely eliminate that stressful daily 6 p.m. debate about where to drag tired children for dinner.
Oh, that's a lifesaver.
Totally. But if you have a larger family or perhaps teenagers who need separate rooms, self-catering villas make a lot more mathematical sense. A full 3-bedroom villa with a private pool near Carvaro or Lagos will run you 150 to 300 euros a night in the peak of summer. If you go in the shoulder season, that plummets to 80 to 120 euros.
Wow, that's a huge drop.
And the secret here is that if you can convince another family to travel with you and split that villa, the per-person cost actually massively undercuts most standard hotels.
That's a really smart hack. Finally, we reach the apex, the luxury tier, which spans wildly from 300 to well over 800 euros a night. And make absolute no mistake, the Algarve's top-end luxury tier is globally competitive and world-class. You have the premium suites at the Pine Cliffs Resort starting from 350 euros. You have the Conrad Algarve in the exclusive Quinta do Lago area starting from 500 euros.
500 euros a night.
Yep. The Anantara Villamora starts from 400 euros. And then there's the crown jewel, Vila Vida Park in Portugal. It is widely considered the Algarve's most celebrated, immaculate luxury property, starting from 600 euros a night. It also happens to be home to the 2 Michelin star restaurant, Ocean.
Oh, wow.
And if you want the ultimate secluded exclusivity, you look to the enclaves of Quinta do Lago and Vila Lobo, where massive, gated golf course villas rent for well over 1,000 euros a single night.
When you look at those numbers side by side, it's almost hard to process. The sheer scale of the price gap is mind-blowing. You can literally sleep on a mattress in a dorm room for 18 euros, or you can sleep in a villa for 1,000 euros on the exact same night, on the exact same coastline. I have to push back on this. Is the luxury tier genuinely objectively worth 50 times the price of the backpacker tier? Does a bed get 50 times better?
Well, I mean, it is the ultimate question of value, and it really comes down to understanding what you are actually trying to buy. To answer it, we should look at the final, highly specific accommodation recommendations from the source's hosts, Phil and H, because they represent two entirely different philosophies of travel.
Yeah, let's look at those.
Phil's ultimate pick is a self-catering apartment right in the middle of Tavira's Old Town for 70 euros a night. His rationale is purely pragmatic. You get an incredibly authentic experience. You have cheap, amazing local restaurants literally on your doorstep. You have easy ferry access to the pristine lagoon beaches. And most importantly, you are paying 40% less than you would for the exact same square footage in Lagos. It is the calculated, value-driven choice of someone who views a room as a base camp.
Right, but then you have H's pick, which swings to the complete polar opposite end of the spectrum. She chooses Vila Vida Park in Portugal.
The 600 euro one.
Yes, exactly. Her passionate argument is that if you are only going to fly to the Algarve once in your life and you want to do it properly, this is the property that delivers the ultimate fantasy in one seamless, perfectly curated package. You get the dramatic cliffs, the immaculate manicured gardens, the completely private beach access, and Michelin star dining without ever having to call an Uber.
It's convenience and luxury all in one.
It cost an absolute fortune. But her point is that the memory is flawless and unforgettable. It highlights the difference between paying for a simple place to store your luggage and sleep versus paying to exist inside a curated, flawlessly executed alternate reality.
Exactly. The value is entirely subjective. But regardless of whether you spent 18 euros or 1,000 euros on your bed, you eventually have to wake up and eat. The next massive daily variable that will relentlessly dictate your budget is food. The culinary landscape in the Algarve is deeply fascinating. It is a tale of two cities, and understanding the mechanics of how it operates is the absolute key to not overspending.
Okay, let's get deep into the weeds on food, groceries, and local etiquette. Because the guide is very, very clear on this point. The Algarve's food system is one of its greatest remaining advantages over the rest of Western Europe, but only if you know how to navigate it. If you don't understand the unwritten rules, you will bleed money at an astonishing rate. Let's start with the absolute baseline of survival, the supermarkets.
The supermarket tier is essential infrastructure, especially if you are operating within that backpacker or mid-range bracket. In Portugal, Pingo Doce is generally considered the best all-around high-quality option. They have incredibly good, fresh bakeries in store, excellent local regional cheeses, and you can get surprisingly complex, highly drinkable Portuguese wines starting from just 3 euros a bottle.
3 euros for a good bottle of wine. That's amazing.
It really is. They also have a hot food counter with great ready-made salads and roasted chickens. Continente is another major player, offering a very similar range, but often located in massive, larger format stores on the outskirts of towns. If you are looking for the absolute rock-bottom lowest prices on your daily basics, you go straight to Lidl.
Right, good old Lidl.
To give you a granular sense of everyday local costs, a standard liter of milk costs between 60 and 80 cents. A 6-pack of Super Bock beer runs about 3 to 4 euros in the supermarket.
Okay, that's super affordable.
Now, to put that exact same beer in perspective, if you walk down to a beachfront bar and buy those same 6 beers from a waiter, you will easily pay 18 euros. buying your sunscreen, your bottled water, and your daily snacks at the supermarket. Rather than relying on the tourist trap shops clustered along the beach entrances, will easily save you 30 to 50% across a one-week trip.
But let's be realistic here. You are on vacation. You're not going to cook every single meal in a cramped apartment kitchen. When you do decide to eat out, you have to understand that the restaurant system here operates in two completely parallel economies that exist side by side.
It really does.
Let me give you the perfect real-world example of how this works. If you sit down for a fresh, grilled fish lunch right on Fisherman's Beach in Albufeira, sitting under a branded umbrella with your toes practically touching the sand, you're going to pay 18 to 20 euros for that plate. But if you turn around, walk 10 minutes uphill, away from the water, and find a small family-run tasca, that exact same species of fish, caught the exact same morning by the exact same local boats, costs 10 to 12 euros. Wow. I look at that €8 difference as a literal convenience tax. You're actively paying an extra 8 to 10 euros purely to avoid walking 10 minutes up a slight incline.
And if you are willing to walk up that hill, you unlock the real secret weapon of the local working economy, the prato do dia, or the plate of the day.
Tell me about the prato do dia.
At these local neighborhood tascas, the prato do dia typically runs about 7 to 9 euros. And that isn't just a tiny appetizer. That usually includes an incredibly hearty main dish, like pork with clams or a massive piece of grilled fish, and a strong espresso coffee to finish. This is the exact meal the local construction workers, bank tellers, and shop owners eat every single day.
That sounds incredible. How do you find them?
If you want to know how to visually identify an authentic spot, look closely at the signage. Look for handwritten chalkboard signs placed on the pavement outside small restaurants. If someone took the physical time to write the daily rotating specials in chalk, that is the universal signal that you have found a kitchen cooking fresh food for locals, not microwaving frozen food for tourists. It is a cultural mechanic that provides incredible culinary value, but it absolutely requires you to step slightly off the illuminated main tourist drag.
And while you were stepping off that main drag and feeling like a savvy local, you need to be deeply, acutely aware of Phil's major food call-out. It is called the couvert trap.
Oh, this one gets everyone.
And I guarantee this trips up almost every single first-time visitor to Portugal. Picture this. You sit down at a charming Portuguese restaurant. Before you even open the menu, the waiter briskly walks over and drops a basket of fresh bread, some marinated carrots, a dish of olives, some butter, and maybe some little packets of sardine pate on your table, entirely unprompted. They just magically appear.
Yep, seen it 100 times.
Now, hear me clearly. These are not free. Everything you physically touch or open from those small plates gets itemized and added to your final bill, typically adding 2 to 4 euros per person. The fix is incredibly simple but requires a bit of confidence. Just politely wave them away with your hand when they arrive, or simply do not touch them and you will not be charged.
It is a fascinating psychological trap. Tourists inherently bring their own cultural norms from home, like the complimentary bread basket in a French bistro, or the free chips and salsa in a Mexican restaurant in the US, and they apply those assumptions to a totally different environment, paying a literal price for their ignorance.
It's so true.
Aside from the couvert, you also have to actively, aggressively avoid the blatant tourist traps. The guide is highly emphatic about this rule. Avoid any restaurant, particularly those clustered on the Albufeira Strip or lining the Vila Moura Marina, that utilizes a massive laminated multi-language menu and employs a staff member standing out on the pavement physically trying to usher you inside. Excellent food in Portugal speaks for itself. It does not need a promoter begging you to eat it.
Which transitions us perfectly into general etiquette. How do you behave so you don't look like that clueless tourist? The Portuguese people are generally very warm, but they can be slightly reserved at first compared to, say, the Spanish or Italians. Learning just a tiny, microscopic bit of the language goes an incredibly long way.
Definitely.
A simple bom dia for good morning, or a polite obrigado if you are male, or obrigada if you are female, for thank you. When it comes to the complex world of tipping, 10% in restaurants is generally appreciated for good service, but it is not strictly mandatory as a service charge is rarely included in the final bill.
That's good to know.
Also, understand the daily rhythm. Lunch is traditionally the main heaviest meal of the day for locals. If you are sitting down at a restaurant demanding a massive dinner before 8 p.m., you are instantly marking yourself with a giant neon sign as a tourist.
So we have isolated all the individual variables. We have the variable cost of the room, the upfront cost of the airport transfer, the baseline cost of the groceries, and the variable cost of the restaurant meals. Now we need to do the math.
Let's do it.
Let's calculate exactly what happens when we combine accommodation, food, and transport into a rigid, daily, out-of-pocket budget. This is the moment where your theoretical Pinterest board planning meets the harsh, mathematical reality of your wallet.
Yes, let's read the exact unvarnished math from the guide for each specific tier, starting at the bottom with the backpacker. The lowest possible tier is 55 to 75 euros per day. Here is exactly how that breaks down. Accommodation is 20 to 30 euros for a bed in a hostel dorm.
Okay.
Food is 15 to 20 euros. This assumes you eat a cheap supermarket breakfast, you hunt down a prato do dia for lunch, and you cook pasta in the hostel kitchen for dinner. Transport is incredibly lean at 2 to 5 euros, assuming you are mostly walking everywhere with an occasional local bus ticket.
Right.
Activities are 0 to 10 euros, relying entirely on free public beaches or maybe renting a surfboard for an hour. Miscellaneous spending is 5 to 10 euros. You add the mandatory 2 euro tourist tax, and your absolute rock-bottom daily total is between 55 and 75 euros. That is as cheap as it gets.
Moving up to the mid-range couple tier, the budget expands to 95 to 140 euros per person per day. Here is the daily breakdown. Accommodation runs 40 to 80 euros per person, assuming you are splitting the cost of a nice apartment or a solid mid-range hotel room.
Makes sense.
Food jumps to 30 to 40 euros. This allows for a comfortable mix of Tasca lunches, maybe one genuinely nice sit-down dinner out, and grabbing supermarket pastries for breakfast. Transport jumps to 10 to 15 euros per person, assuming you have a rental car amortized at roughly 25 euros a day and split between 2 people, or taking occasional boat rides in the evening.
Okay, so a bit more freedom.
Exactly. Activities are budgeted at 10 to 20 euros, covering paid experiences like a boat tour to Benadryl Cave or a local wine tasting. Miscellaneous is 5 to 10 euros, plus the 2 euro tourist tax. That brings the daily financial reality to between 95 and 140 euros per person. If you are a couple, you are spending up to 280 euros a day combined.
And then we look at the luxury tier, where the ceiling essentially disappears. This runs from 220 to over 500 euros per person per day. Accommodation is obviously the massive jump here, 150 to 400 euros per person, assuming you are splitting a luxury resort rooms or renting a premium coastal villa.
Oh, easily.
Food is 60 to 100 euros daily, easily covering expensive resort dining and maybe a Michelin-level tasting menu dinner. Transport is 15 to 25 euros to cover a premium rental car or private chauffeur transfers. Activities are 30 to 50 euros, which could be a private, catered boat charter or premium golf green fees that can easily exceed 100 euros for a single round. Miscellaneous is 10 to 20 euros. Add the 2 euro tax, and you are sitting at 220 to well over 500 euros daily.
The guide also provides a very specific, crucial monthly figure for the emerging digital nomad demographic, 1,500 to 2,200 euros per month.
Okay, for the whole month.
Yeah. The Algarve is aggressively positioning itself as a haven for remote workers. There is highly reliable, fast Wi-Fi in almost all the major towns, and dedicated co-working spaces are rapidly emerging in places like Lagos and Faro. If you look closely, you can find monthly apartment rentals in the eastern towns of Tavira or Olham, starting from 700 to 1,000 euros.
700 to 1,000.
Yes. Lagos tends to attract a much younger, stronger, more social digital nomad community, while Tavira is heavily preferred by older professionals seeking better value and a significantly quieter environment for deep, focused work.
Wait, let me stop you right there. For that digital nomad arriving in 2026, how does the brutal local housing crisis we discussed earlier directly threaten this supposedly comfortable 1,500 euro monthly budget? Because reading these numbers, that 700 euro rental price seems incredibly vulnerable to reality.
It is extremely vulnerable. In fact, it's precarious. When we talk about a total monthly budget of 1,500 euros, 700 to 1,000 euros of that is entirely locked up in the base rent. The housing crisis, primarily driven by the government's end of the rent caps and the relentless proliferation of short-term vacation rentals, means that good, reasonably priced long-term residential leases are profoundly, terrifyingly scarce. The local competition for them is fierce.
So what happens when they actually get there?
Well, if a nomad arrives in the Algarve in May, assuming they can just easily sign a cheap 6-month lease, they are in for a massive shock. They will find themselves violently forced into the short-term vacation market, which operates at a massive tourist-level premium. That instantly shatters the 1,500 euro budget ceiling.
Wow.
Yeah. The daily budgets we just detailed are only mathematically accurate if you rigidly align your planning with the 2026 economic reality. And they are only accurate if you manage to avoid falling into the region's major financial sinkholes.
Which brings us to the most practical part of this guide, the three named logistics traps. Because getting your spreadsheet budget right on paper at home is one thing, but these are the very real, very common on-the-ground traps that will completely drain your wallet if you aren't prepared for them. Let's break some down. Trap number one is what they call the car rental dependency.
The core mechanism behind this trap is pure, unforgiving geography. As we established, the Algarve coastline spans a massive 150 kilometers. Public transport connecting the various beaches to the main towns is highly infrequent, it takes highly indirect routes, and crucially, it often stops running entirely early in the evening.
So you're basically stuck.
Exactly. Some of the most iconic, breathtaking spots you've seen on Instagram, like the famous Benajal Cave, the arches of Praia da Marinha, and the dramatic Ponta da Piada cliffs near Lagos, are simply physically inaccessible without a personal car, an expensive taxi ride, or a paid guided tour.
The lived reality of this trap is absolutely brutal for budget-conscious travelers. I've seen it happen. They arrive at Faro Airport, assuming that local buses will effortlessly, cheaply connect all the major highlights, just like they do in major European cities. So they explicitly choose not to rent a car to save $50 a day.
Big mistake.
Right. And then they spend their entire highly anticipated holiday physically trapped in a single town, entirely missing the Algarve's most dramatic wild scenery. Or, to overcompensate for feeling trapped, they start hemorrhaging 30 to 50 euros a single day on constant surging boat rides and expensive group boat tours just to see a beach that was 5 miles away.
The actionable fix here is incredibly straightforward. Just rent a car. Do not fight the geography.
Yeah, rent a car.
If you book far enough in advance, it costs a very reasonable 25 to 40 euros per day, and that usually includes basic insurance. If you split that daily rate between two people, it is already significantly cheaper than booking 2 return taxi fares. The guide specifically strongly recommends booking through local Portuguese operators like Auto Jardim or Tourist Prime.
Rather than the big international chain.
Exactly, rather than defaulting to the massive international corporate chains. The local companies tend to be cheaper up front and hit you with far fewer hidden aggressive upcharges at the desk. And a crucial logistical tip, be absolutely sure to collect the car at Faro Airport immediately upon arrival to avoid paying secondary transfer costs to reach your hotel.
Trap number 2 is the summer accommodation ambush. The hidden mechanism here is that while Algarve accommodation prices in the peak of July and August run 60% higher than the shoulder season, the real dangerous trap isn't the high price. It is the sheer lack of availability.
Yeah, everything is just gone.
The absolute best value apartments, the great family villas with the safe pools, and the highly reviewed, solid mid-range hotels are completely, totally sold out by March for any dates in the summer.
And the lived reality of this trap is incredibly common and highly stressful. Families will spot a great deal on budget flights in April, they book the non-refundable seats, and they assume they will just figure out the accommodation later when they have more time.
Oof.
But by May, they actually start looking, and the only options left on the internet that fit their budget are poorly located, sweltering inland apartments with no pool, a 15-minute drive along a busy highway from the nearest beach. So they end up paying significantly more money for a vastly worse accommodation experience, and then they have to spend extra time and money on transport every single day just to let their kids see the water.
It is the absolute classic travel mistake. Booking the cheap flight, but waiting on the hotel and ending up financially trapped inland. The fix. You must book your accommodation before or at the exact same minute as your flights. For summer 2026, the guide warns that the booking window of opportunity is already rapidly closing.
It really is.
The smartest strategy is to use booking platforms that offer free cancellation to lock in decent, acceptable rates right now to secure your base. And then you can continue casually checking for better options over the next few months. Alternatively, if your schedule allows, consider shifting your dates entirely. The Easter holidays and the late May half-term offer nearly identical, beautiful weather, but at 30 to 40% lower cost and with vastly more inventory available.
Finally, trap number 3. The couvert and tourist menu double tax. We touched on the mechanics of this during the food discussion, but the way it drains a budget is insidious because it happens in small increments. Restaurants serve the couvert, the unrequested bread, olives, butter, sometimes cheese, and local pâté, without being asked. tourists automatically assume it's complimentary. It isn't. At the exact same time, restaurants aggressively push these tourist menu deals.
Oh, I've seen those.
Yeah, they advertise a full 3 courses for, say, 15 euros. It looks like an incredible bargain on the chalkboard, but they typically serve much lower quality, mass-produced food at a far higher margin markup than if you simply ordered a fresh, local dish a la carte from the regular menu.
The lived reality of this is a family of 4 sitting down, mindlessly eating the couvert at every single meal, which quietly adds 3 to 5 euros per person per sitting. And then they order those bad generic tourist menus all week long thinking they're saving money. By the end of a 7-day trip, they have quietly bled 30 to 50 extra euros a day. Money that could have been spent on a truly incredible experience just because they weren't paying attention.
And again, this comes directly back to the psychology of these traps. Tourists bring deeply ingrained assumptions from home, like the legal right to free tap water in a UK pub or free bread in a US steakhouse, and they pay a literal daily tax for not adapting to local customs.
So what's the fix?
The actionable, confident fix is to politely but firmly wave away the couvert the second the waiter's hand touches the table, saying, "No, obrigado" is completely culturally normal in Portugal, and absolutely no one will be offended. Furthermore, you should ignore those laminated tourist menus entirely.
Good advice.
Find the local tascas with the handwritten chalkboard specials, eat the hearty prato dodaya at lunch for 7 to 9 euros, and take all that money you successfully saved and blow it on one genuinely excellent, memorable seafood dinner at a renowned, authentic place like a Era Domel in Lulé or O Camilo perched on the cliffs in Lagos.
Okay, so navigating those traps and getting your logistics right keeps your wallet safe. But what about keeping yourself physically safe? It's time to discuss safety, solo travel, and comfort, because the actual statistical risks in the Algarve might not be what your anxiety is currently telling you they are.
Let's look at the objective risk hierarchy for the Algarve, starting with the absolute #1 risk: sun and heat exposure.
Really, just the sun.
I know it might sound incredibly mundane, almost like a nagging parent, but this is the most common tourist health issue by a very wide margin. The Algarve's famous, visually stunning, cliff-backed beaches are incredible, but they offer zero natural tree shade.
Oh, wow. None at all.
None. In July and August, temperatures on the sand regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius. Heat stroke, severe, blistering sunburn, and extreme dehydration send vastly more tourists to local Portuguese medical facilities than any other single cause.
Risk number 2 is the ocean conditions. And this is where people unfortunately get into very serious trouble. I have to ask, why do intelligent tourists consistently and dangerously underestimate the Atlantic Ocean compared to the Mediterranean Sea?
Because aesthetically, they look highly similar on a postcard: blue water, golden sand. But structurally, they behave entirely differently. The Mediterranean is generally a closed, relatively calm, tidal light sea.
And the Atlantic.
The Atlantic is a massive, highly energetic, open ocean. The western Algarve beaches in particular, places like Sagres, Arafana, and Amado, bear the direct, unfiltered brunt of massive Atlantic swells. They feature incredibly powerful surf, highly unpredictable hidden rip currents, and a very cold, shockingly strong undertow that operates like an invisible treadmill pulling you out to sea.
That sounds terrifying.
It can be. Lifeguarded beaches operate on a highly strict, internationally recognized colored flag system. A green flag means it is safe to swim, yellow means extreme caution, often meaning you shouldn't go past your waist, and a red flag means absolutely no swimming under any circumstances. You must obey them.
So people ignore the flags.
Sometimes, yes. Tragically, drownings occur every single year, and they predominantly happen at unpatrolled, isolated, highly photogenic cove beaches where tourists vastly underestimate the raw kinetic power of the water. It requires a complete mental reframing of how you view danger. In the Algarve, the real statistical threat to your safety isn't a mugger in an alleyway, it is nature itself.
Which perfectly frames the number 3 risk: petty crime. And it's ranked number 3 for a very good reason. Statistically, Portugal consistently ranks as one of Europe's and the world's safest countries. Violent, unprovoked crime against tourists is exceedingly rare.
It really is very safe.
What you do have to actively watch out for is highly opportunistic theft in very predictable, easily avoidable locations. We're talking about the chaotic Albufeira Strip late at night when thousands of people have had way too much to drink, or leaving expensive cameras and bags unattended on crowded beaches where you swim, or leaving visible luggage sitting in the backseat of your rental car while you stop for a quick lunch. If you just apply standard, boring, everyday, common sense precautions, you will be absolutely fine.
The guide also provides very specific, tailored assessments for different demographics of travelers. For solo female travelers, the assessment is a resounding excellent.
That's fantastic to hear.
The Algarve is widely considered one of Europe's safest, most comfortable regions for women traveling entirely alone. The broader Portuguese culture is inherently respectful and non-aggressive. The main streets in all the major towns are well lit and active late into the evening. And the established backpacker community, particularly in the western hubs like Lagos and Sagres, is highly social, incredibly welcoming, and easy to integrate into. Walking alone at night in the main resort towns and historic municipal centers is generally considered very safe.
For families, the assessment is very strong. The eastern Algarve, particularly with the Rio Formosa lagoon beaches, offers incredibly calm, warm, shallow water that is absolutely ideal and physically safe for young toddlers. You also have access to massive, highly regulated water parks like Slide and Splash near Lagoa and Aqua Show near Cortira, providing incredibly easy full-day family entertainment.
Those water parks are huge draws for families.
And crucially, if something does go wrong, the medical infrastructure is modern and highly reliable. There are excellent public and private hospitals in Faro, Portimão, and Lagos that handle tourist emergencies highly efficiently. Well-stocked pharmacies are widely available on almost every main street, and European health insurance cards are universally accepted. Oh, and a quick, practical health note that saves a lot of money. The municipal tap water is completely 100% safe to drink throughout the entire region. You don't need to buy plastic bottles.
So, assuming you successfully survive the relentless midday sun, respect the raw power of the Atlantic surf, and keep an intelligent eye on your beach bag, what are the actual memorable highlights of the trip? We need to balance the spreadsheet math by looking at the absolute best moments, and crucially for this honest guide, the biggest disappointments.
Let's start with the absolute bests. According to the guide, the single visual moment that stays burned in your memory is arriving by boat at the Binajul Cave.
Oh, it's stunning.
I want you to imagine a vast, cathedral-like sea cave with a naturally collapsed circular ceiling that opens right up to the blue sky above. There is a pristine patch of golden sand resting directly on the cave floor, and glowing turquoise water floods in through the massive main entrance arch. It is truly, without exaggeration, one of the most extraordinary natural geological formations in all of Europe. You can easily take guided boat tours departing from nearby Carvoeiro or Portimão. They generally cost between 20 and 35 euros and last roughly 90 minutes. It is worth every single penny.
For the single best beach experience, the guide points explicitly to Praia da Marinha, but with a highly specific caveat. You must go at 7 a.m. in September.
7 a.m., that's early.
It is early, but this specific beach is consistently ranked by travel magazines among Europe's absolute finest because of its massive, iconic, towering golden limestone sea arches and incredibly crystal clear water. If you make the effort to go at dawn in the shoulder season, you might literally be one of only 5 people standing on the entire expanse of sand.
That sounds magical.
It is. Part of the structural reason it successfully retains its magic is access. Getting to the sand requires physically navigating a long, very steep cliff staircase, which naturally beautifully acts as a filter to keep it vastly quieter than the generic beaches you can just drive a car right up to.
And for the best food moment, I love this. It's not a pretentious, expensive Michelin-starred restaurant. It is an incredibly simple, loud, messy grilled piri-piri chicken lunch at a roadside churrascaria just outside the small inland town of Guia.
Oh, Guia, yes.
Guia is widely recognized as the unofficial, undisputed piri-piri chicken capital of the entire Algarve. For an absurdly cheap 6 to 8 euros, you get half a chicken chopped up, heavily spiced, roasted over open coals, alongside a mountain of fries and a simple tomato salad. It is completely unpretentious, incredibly loud, ridiculously cheap, and genuinely one of the most viscerally satisfying meals you will eat in all of Portugal.
And it costs basically nothing.
I absolutely love that the peak culinary experience costs less than 10 euros, while the Praia de Marina Dawn experience is essentially free. It perfectly illustrates that you absolutely do not have to spend a fortune to find the actual magic of the region.
But we also promised brutal, unvarnished honesty, which means looking closely at the other, uglier side of the coin. According to Phil and H, the most egregiously overhyped experience in the entire region is Albufeira's infamous strip.
This cup, yeah.
It is heavily, constantly promoted as the absolute vibrant center of Algarve nightlife, but the grim reality is that it is a glaring, sticky, neon corridor packed tightly with generic English pubs, aggressively loud karaoke bars, and incredibly aggressive commission-based bar promoters physically shoving laminated menus in your face, desperately trying to sell you plastic buckets filled with cheap, sugary, neon-colored cocktails. If you have ever been to any major mass-market Mediterranean party strip, places like Magaluf in Spain, Malia in Greece, or Sunny Beach in Bulgaria, you have already experienced exactly what this is, and frankly, the Algarve version isn't even the best iteration of that specific model.
The sheer chaotic dread of walking down the Albufeira Strip is the exact polar opposite of that serene, quiet 7 a.m. moment at Praia da Marina, which seamlessly leads to the guide's biggest honest disappointment, the sheer relentless overdevelopment of the central Algarve.
It's a real issue.
The entire coastal stretch running from Albufeira straight through to Villamora has been overwhelmingly dominated by towering high-rise apartment blocks, sprawling, water-hungry golf courses, and massive generic resort complexes. This aggressive development has effectively, tragically erased almost all traces of traditional Portuguese architectural or cultural character from the immediate area. If you spend your entire 2-week trip inside this highly manicured central zone, you could honestly be anywhere in southern Europe. You wouldn't know you're in Portugal.
It is the ultimate classic tourist trade-off between easy convenience and raw authenticity. In that central zone, you absolutely get the fluent English-speaking staff, the highly familiar, comforting food, and the incredibly easy, frictionless logistics, but you completely lose the actual soul of the destination.
Right.
As the guide eloquently points out, the true beating soul of the Algarve now largely lives on its extreme edges, in the quiet, tiled authenticity of Tavira and Alham in the Far East, or the historic, slightly rugged, bohemian energy of Lagos and Sagres in the Far West. It emphatically does not live in the concrete, purpose-built resort sprawl sitting in the middle.
But what if that description of central overdevelopment turns you off entirely? What if you read this guide and think, you know what, maybe the Algarve just isn't for me anymore? Where else in Europe should you look for a coastal trip? The guide gives us 2 very specific, highly compelling alternatives to consider.
Alternative number 1 is the Silver Coast, officially known as the Costa da Prata, and it keeps you right there in Portugal. This beautiful region is located roughly 90 minutes north of Lisbon, centered around highly authentic coastal towns like Nazaré and Peniche.
So what's the vibe there?
What you get up here are incredibly dramatic, sweeping, wild Atlantic surf beaches and genuinely authentic working Portuguese fishing towns that haven't been hollowed out by tourism. And crucially, because it isn't as famous, the prices run a massive 25 to 30% below what you will pay in the Algarve.
Wow, 30% less.
The surf culture here is truly world-class and serious. Nazaré is globally famous for holding the official world record for the largest wave ever surfed by a human being.
But there's a massive practical trade-off, right? If I'm traveling with 2 young kids who just want to splash around and swim the ocean all day long, does the Silver Coast's notoriously cooler water fundamentally disqualify it as an option?
For a family with young children looking for a classic lazy swimming holiday, yes, it probably does completely disqualify it. The Atlantic water up on the Silver Coast is noticeably significantly cooler year-round, the waves are vastly larger and more aggressive, and there are far, far fewer sheltered, calm swimming cove beaches.
Okay.
The overall tourist infrastructure, like the water parks and the kids' clubs, is also significantly less developed. You have to weigh these alternatives strictly based on your specific travel persona. You actively choose the Silver Coast if you desperately want authentic, highly affordable coastal Portugal, and you are deeply drawn to serious, rugged surf culture. You stick with the Algarve if you prioritize guaranteed warm swimming water and incredibly easy, highly developed, family-friendly beaches.
Alternative number 2 takes us completely across the border into Spain. The Andalusia Costa de la Luz. This is the stunning, expansive coastline stretching exactly from Huelva down to Tarifa, sitting right across the border from the eastern edge of the Algarve.
Right next door.
Here, you get massive, wide, windswept Atlantic beaches and incredible, highly authentic late-night Spanish tapas culture. The prices are highly comparable, almost identical to the Algarve. Towns like Conil del Frontera offer wonderful, vastly quieter, more culturally intact alternatives to the massive concrete overdevelopment you see over on the more famous Spanish Costa del Sol.
Exactly. You choose the Costa de la Luz if you heavily personally prefer Spanish food and late-night tapas culture, and if you want easier geographic access for incredible cultural day trips to magnificent historic cities like Seville and Cadiz. But you choose the Algarve if you want vastly more visual geographical variety in your beaches, specifically those dramatic, iconic, towering limestone cliff formations and hidden sea caves, and slightly lower prices when dining out at basic local restaurants.
All right, this brings it all back to the ultimate defining question of the entire deep dive. We have meticulously broken down the geography, the surging prices, the hidden traps, the highest highs, and the lowest lows. It is time for the final matrix. We're going to do a rapid-fire breakdown of each specific traveler tier. I will give you the persona and their daily budget, and you give us the definitive yes or yes with conditions rationale. Are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it.
The backpacker. Budget. 55 to 75 euros a day. Is the Algarve worth it?
Yes. At exactly 55 to 75 euros a day, the Algarve remains one of Western Europe's absolute most affordable, high-quality beach destinations for strict budget travelers. The dedicated hostel infrastructure in places like Levos and Sagres is world-class and highly social. If you strictly utilize supermarket self-catering to control costs, it keeps your food budget incredibly low, and the region's absolute best asset, the beaches and the cliffs, are entirely free to access. It is definitely, absolutely not the 20 euro a day bargain it was a decade ago, but it still substantially mathematically undercuts equivalent trips to coastal Spain, Italy, and Greece.
The mid-range couple.
Right.
Budget. 95 to 140 euros per person per day. Is it worth it?
Yes. In fact, this specific tier is the Algarve's absolute sweet spot. At 95 to 140 euros a day, you get access to stunningly beautiful beaches, excellent fresh local seafood, and highly reliable sunshine, while still actively experiencing a genuine warm Portuguese atmosphere. The major strict caveat is that you must completely avoid the central Algarve resort sprawl and base yourself out on the edges, Lagos, Tavira, or Olham. If you follow that one rule and deliberately visit during the shoulder months of June or September, the value proposition is nearly unbeatable anywhere in Western Europe.
The family. Budget. 120 to 250 euros a night for accommodation. Is it worth it?
Yes. The sheer combination of logistical factors makes it work perfectly. The incredibly safe, warm, shallow lagoon beaches in the east, the world-class, massive water parks, the highly reliable medical infrastructure, the sheer abundance of family-friendly self-catering villas, and the massive competitive network of direct budget flights from across Europe. It undeniably makes the Algarve one of the absolute best, most frictionless family beach destinations on the continent. The strict rules for success: book your accommodation by February for a summer trip, absolutely rent a car, and remember to bring protective reef shoes for the rocky, uneven cove beaches.
The luxury traveler. Budget 220 to over 500 euros per person per day. Is it worth it?
Yes, with conditions. And the conditions are highly strict. You must stay at the absolute top-tier properties, places like Vila Vita Park, Pine Cliffs, or the Conrad Algarve. These specific elite properties deliver a genuinely flawless, world-class experience. Outside of these select few, the broader luxury infrastructure can be highly inconsistent. Paying 300 euros a night for a generic, aging four-star hotel in Villamora that feels like a crowded, chaotic business convention center is objectively poor financial value. The Algarve's luxury tier can compete with elite places like Sardinia and the Amalfi Coast at half the price, but only if you meticulously book the very top properties.
Finally, the digital nomad or solo traveler.
Budget.
1,500 to 2,200 euros a month. Is it worth it?
Yes, with conditions. The positives are undeniably strong. Lagos has a rapidly growing, highly active co-working scene and a very strong, welcoming social community. Tavira and Alhão offer somewhat affordable long-term rentals steeped with deep, authentic Portuguese character, but the massive condition is successfully navigating the local housing crisis. Monthly leases are incredibly competitive and prices are rising aggressively fast. You must budget a strict minimum of 700 to 1,000 euros just for a decent basic apartment, and you absolutely have to start searching months before your actual arrival. Additionally, the highly unreliable public transport means securing a long-term car or scooter rental is absolutely essential if you want to explore anywhere beyond your immediate base town.
So, to synthesize this massive, exhaustive journey we have just taken together, from the frustrating implementation of that €2 tourist tax all the way to a wildly varied daily budget range that stretches from a humble 18-euro hostel dorm bed to a staggering 1,000-euro luxury golf villa. The overarching vital lesson here is that visiting the Algarve in 2026 demands strategic, meticulous early planning, rather than the blind last-minute booking that used to work so well a decade ago. You have to know your zone, you absolutely have to know your season, and you have to dodge those logistics traps.
It absolutely requires strategy now, and that leaves us with a much larger, almost philosophical question to mull over as we finish. We spent this entire deep dive talking about economic gentrification, who can afford the Algarve today versus yesterday. But there is a much larger silent shift happening that the source guide touches on indirectly through its severe heat warnings. We are entering an era of climate migration in European tourism.
Oh, interesting.
As the Mediterranean and southern Spain become borderline unlivable in July and August, pushing past 40 degrees, the Algarve's moderating Atlantic breezes are suddenly making it a climate refuge, not just a tax refuge. So the philosophical question isn't just about who can afford the Algarve when it becomes a premium market. It's about what happens to European travel when the traditional peak summer is forced into November, and destinations like the Algarve are expected to host the entire continent year-round. When a destination successfully pivots from a budget backpacker haven to a premium, high-yield market, what happens to the generations of travelers who grew up making their memories there? Does a place belong to the people who can afford it today or the people who built its reputation yesterday?
That is the honest verdict from Phil and HS.